I'm going to break one of my own rules and have my phone with me up here to preach because I couldn't get my sermon to print out, and I had a few things in there that I wanted to make sure and get exactly right. So if you see me look at my phone, how many passes per year do I get for that? I don't know. It doesn't matter. 3? Trish says 3. It's in the rubric somewhere. I don't know. It's a big book. If you read my newsletter on Friday, and I know you all did, I talked about June being a very colorful month. And here we are wearing orange, except if you're visiting and you don't get my newsletter or whatever, or just forgot, I forget all the time. In fact, if I didn't have this from Jolene, I don't think I own any orange. So I needed a little help. But thank you to those who were orange and those who are not. I know we are all together in spirit to raise awareness against gun violence and for gun violence prevention. And we're going to have Aaron Crossley come up to speak after I'm done, so I'm going to try to keep this short. And so far I'm not doing great. But it's a very colorful month, June. We have orange today. June is also Pride Awareness Month, where you have literally all the colors. And so we are trying to check a lot of boxes here in one day. And that usually happens in June for some reason. But colors, we wear these colors, we use these colors on flags or on clothes or on stickers or whatever, to represent something, to represent ourselves, our ideas, our values, our associations. But a color, the same color can mean very different things to different people, right? So I have a few examples of that, and this is the thing I wanted to make sure not to mess up, because I need your help. I'm going to ask you guys to put a thumbs up. Now, you've been doing a lot of thumbs up and thumbs down on the internet. I'm going to have you do it in real person, so hopefully you remember how to do it with your actual hand, right? Let's practice. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Not getting a lot of participation just yet. It's thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, it's a little different than this. It's this. All right, I'm going to give you a few color examples, representations of colors, and if you feel like that's a positive representation, a representation of a positive idea, thumbs up. If it's negative, thumbs down, okay? Here we go. Black Tuesday. Do you remember the history? Remember, Black Tuesday was the day the stock market crashed in 1929. It began the Great Depression. Definitely a negative thing, right? How about Black Friday? Now, you don't have to like Black Friday, but the color black in this instance refers to businesses are in the black. Thank you. Thank you. Actually, you know what? That's a better sermon than what I've got. Do you want to? All you have to do is watch Charlie Brown's Christmas special, and you'll get it, right? But for those businesses, they call it Black Friday because that is the day that they get into the black, which if you're one of them, positive, right? So Black Tuesday, Black Friday, very different. Now, True Blue, positive or negative? True Blue, that's a positive notion, right? How about Feeling Blue? That's right, negative. Going Green. Creation Care, right? We're going green, that's good. How about he's a little green? It means he's inexperienced. That's not a negative remark about somebody, right? Maybe there's some grace in it, but it's negative. So, feeling a little green, also negative, right? So we're seeing the way the same color can mean different things in different situations, right? Okay, now, one more. Red flag. It's negative almost by definition. That's a red flag right there. Okay, how about a red letter day? That's a good thing. Okay, I'm gonna stop bugging you on this because red, I'm gonna stick with red for a minute. Red is actually a very diverse symbol. We have a lot of different ground that we cover with that color red because we see red ink is the opposite of black ink. We talked about Black Friday, black ink. Well, red ink means you're negative, right? So that's a bad thing. But of course, the Episcopal Church loves red. We love our red doors because it's a symbol of welcome and of hospitality, right? It's also the color that we use for our vestments for big feast days like we just did for Pentecost. Red is a very celebratory, very festive color. And the blood of Christ is such a central notion. to all of our faith and our spirituality and our theology, that becomes a central symbol as well. The color of blood is a very important color to us in our worship and in our seasons and in our all of our accoutrements, right? Our vestments and everything, red. So now, in case you didn't get enough baseball talk from me last week, another example of red is the Cincinnati Reds baseball team. If you're a history buff, you may recall the story of in the 1950s, since Reds was not a great name for a baseball team or any team, right? Because red, if you're a red, that means you're a communist. You're a traitor, you're a spy, you're un-American. There was that whole red scare. And they would say, better dead than red, right? So the Cincinnati Reds had to change their name. Anybody know? I think I heard it, the Redlegs. For like 6 years, 7 years, the Cincinnati Redlegs, and then they changed it back after that. Am I getting this right? Am I getting my history right? Yeah. So again, same color, very different ideas to different people or even just at different times. And that was this big political movement, big political problem at the time, and so they had to change it. And so as long as we're speaking about politics and authority and all of that, let's look at the readings for today, because our readings get into that. So if we look at 1 Samuel, our story is that the people want a king. They're not really happy thinking of God as their king, so they want a human king so they can be all like all the other nations, because the kids down the street have one, so I need one too, right? I want a king. And the central idea in this 1 Samuel passage is where God is saying, okay, fine, have it your way. This is it can all be boiled down to be careful what you wish for. And that's what God is doing. God is saying, you can have it, but I'm going to give you a disclaimer, because it's going to be terrible. You're going to hate it. And now we have it in writing for all eternity, so you can't say I didn't warn you. He said, you're going to have your king, but this is what your king is going to be like. But then we look, so basically we're saying we're putting too much of our trust in these systems. And if there is a common thread across these readings, I don't know if it's an intentional commonality or not. But I see it, and it says, beware of trust in your systems. We're going to have these certain institutions in our lives that we may want to implicitly trust, and the people of Israel wanted to put their trust in a monarchy, and God says, okay, careful about that. And if we keep reading then in the epistle, we have Paul is sort of summing it up in a way with his metaphor of the earthly tent. You saw that line? When Paul says, for we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. Is Paul anti-tent? No, Paul is pro-tent. Paul was a tent maker, right? He's not going to come out anti-tent. It's a good thing. It's a metaphor and a representation of the blessings that we have in life, of our homes, of our jobs, of the provisions that we have, the prosperity that we have in life. All of that is a blessing. But what is he saying? It's not forever. Hold it loosely. Give thanks. Live in gratitude for it, but recognize this is temporary. There is something eternal, and that's where our trust belongs. And I feel like Jesus is underscoring that in the gospel passage, which there's a lot going on in that gospel passage, by the way, and there are some triggers involved with that blaspheming the Spirit and the unforgivable sin, and if you're feeling really concerned over that, talk to me afterwards. But we're going to focus on the family aspect right now, because, maybe you don't trust a president, maybe you don't trust a governor, maybe you don't trust the courts, maybe these sort of cultural systems are naturally you're skeptical of them. But family, if you can trust anyone, you ought to be able to trust family, right? And now, your mileage may vary, granted. But if you have a trustworthy family, sure, go ahead and trust them. And you'd think the Bible would be in favor of that. But here, Jesus is cautioning us against even that. Because we see him at work in his ministry. We see him fulfilling his purpose as the Messiah, as the Son of God. But his own mother, Mary, who we revere as being a saint and a very holy person, is really having trouble making that transition, of pivoting between Son of God, okay, but that's my son. And his brothers and sisters are like, that's my brother. How come all these other people are trying to take him from us? Or maybe they're even a little sore because Jesus has left his family behind, in a sense, to go and fulfill his purpose. He had a time of being big brother Jesus, of being son Jesus. And now it's his time to go and fulfill this larger purpose, and they are not really having it. Like, this is not dignified, this is not you. We know you, and this isn't it. And he has to kind of lay down the law with them and say, look, you had plenty of time to prepare for this. You know who I'm supposed to be. And it's not just for you, it's for everyone. In that moment, Jesus loved his family. He loved his mother. He loved his sisters and brothers. We love our families to the best of our ability. We do everything we can to love them and support them and care for them. But we don't worship them. We don't allow our families to get in the way of our God-given purpose, if we can help it. And so Jesus is trying to say, look, even the best things in the world are still in the world. And there is something greater. There is something more eternal, something more true. And we can't really fully enjoy those blessings unless we are focused on the source of those blessings, unless first things come first. And so as we try to hold these systems at bay a little bit, as we try to keep an arm's length, remembering where our true faith lies, we can recognize the problems. We can wear orange to say, hey, we have a catastrophe on our hands. We can call out the problem of, in this case, gun violence, and say maybe those systems are not working the way they ought to be, and we need to call that to account. And I'm going to defer to Aaron on some of that when he comes up in here in just a minute. We need to call out that there are real dangers, and obviously there are physical dangers of violence and of accidents, but there's also those spiritual dangers of putting our trust where it doesn't belong. When we campaign for or volunteer for or vote for an elected official, we may be doing our duty in the right attitude and the right spirit, and that's great. But we may also be putting all of our trust, oh, this is the one that's finally going to fix things for us. Or when we buy a handgun, or we decide to own a firearm, we may be doing a perfectly fine, reasonable thing, or we may be putting all of our trust in this one thing to keep us safe. Where does our faith really belong? And if we circle back to 1 Samuel, there for just a moment, I think it's important to see one more thing that God is saying to Samuel about that trust. God is saying, don't worry, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting, he's saying it's not you, it's me, basically. They are rejecting me. In their desire for this king and their desire to put their trust in these earthly systems, these earthly institutions, they are rejecting me. And we don't have to be dualistic about it, thankfully. We don't have to choose between God and voting. We don't have to choose between God and having a house. But God is very interested in our priorities, because God knows that that source, the source from whom all blessings flow, is when we recognize that is when we are going to have everything in right perspective. We're going to have everything in order, and we can both appreciate our blessings and hold them loosely, recognizing that they're not forever. And I think toward that end, I want to call back to the psalm, and then I'm going to wrap up here. If you look at the end, or at the psalm begins with, I will give you thanks, O God, with my whole heart, before the gods. before the gods of politics, before the gods of firearms, before the gods even of family. I will sing your praise. And then down at the end, the Lord will make good his purpose for me. O Lord, your love endures forever. Do not abandon the work of your hands. Amen. Aaron. He told me not to say, I see the remainder of my time, the distinguished gentleman from Independence. So I'm not going to. I'm just going to say, Aaron, thank you. Welcome.
Absolutely.